Cartoonishly evil villains are easy. Just have them murder some innocents, or plan to take over the world, or take calls on speakerphone in public. You know who you are, you demons. Sympathetic villains are tougher to pull off. They're doing evil things, but for reasons we can understand, or even relate to. Done right, they can raise the stakes and add moral complications that make your game hit way harder. But it's a tricky line to walk. If their motivation isn't believable, you end up with a villain who's neither interesting nor threatening. But if they're too sympathetic, they may not feel like a villain at all. Part of their appeal is the possibility that they could be redeemed. But if they're redeemed too easily, there go all your stakes. Well, good news, I have found a solution. A few weeks ago, I watched K-pop Demon Hunters on Netflix, and ever since, I've been thinking about it a completely normal amount.
Got to wild, but now that's how I'm getting paid.
Pictures here.
They kept her as a trainee for 10 years. She never even debuted. Alongside great music and animated heartthrobs and my favorite cat in the whole world, this movie also demonstrates the perfect 3-step formula for sympathetic villains. So today, I'm gonna share that formula with you using K-pop Demon Hunters to show you how it works. If you haven't seen the movie, don't worry, I'll give you the context you need. But there will be some major spoilers, so I also won't be offended if you have to set this video aside until you've been properly indoctrinated. Until you've seen it. Seriously, big spoilers for the whole plot. Consider yourselves warned. In case you haven't heard of K-pop Demon Hunters, it's a new Netflix animated musical from Sony. It's blowing up on social media, breaking records on Netflix, and the music is even topping the Billboard global charts. It's about a K-pop group called Huntrix who fights demons. The antagonists, of course, are a demon boy band. If you're rolling your eyes right now, I get it. I was skeptical at first too, and then an hour later, I was ugly crying.
Why couldn't you love me? I do.
Our model for a sympathetic villain is this guy, Ginny. He was once human, but made a deal with the head honcho demon, Kima, to escape his life of poverty. Now he himself has become a demon and is the mastermind behind the demon boy band plan. They're called the Saja Boys, and if they can steal all the fans away from Huntrix, the human world will be left undefended and demons can feast freely on souls as nature intended. Ginny is the perfect model for a sympathetic villain, and not just because he's hot, although he is very hot. Don't judge me, they knew exactly what they were doing here. That's why I always carry a sword. It really ramps up the sexual tension. But no, he's the perfect model thanks to 3 specific features, and these features are repeatable. You can use them to create your own unique sympathetic villains over and over again. Let's go through them one by one. The first is his goal. Ginny's motivation is to take down Huntrix and harvest a bunch of souls so that in turn, Kima will erase his memories of his family, which cause him constant pain. Obviously, every villain has a goal, but a sympathetic villain can't just have any goal. It's important that this goal be impossible or at least extremely difficult to accomplish without doing evil. I can relate to this. I have to make YouTube thumbnails every week. Clickbait is more or less equivalent to stealing souls, right? Some other great examples of this are Anakin Skywalker, who thinks becoming a Sith Lord is the only way to save Padme, or Magneto, who thinks that the only way to keep mutants safe from the threat of a dominant human population is to pull an Uno reverse and pivot to mutant supremacy instead. To be clear, I am not suggesting that your players can't come up with creative, non-evil ways to solve your sympathetic villain's problem. All I'm saying is that the villain needs to believe that doing evil is their only path forward. They need a way to justify their actions that your players can have sympathy for, because that's what we mean when we say a villain is sympathetic. It means if we were in their position, we might not have made the same choices, but we understand why they did. We can see the path that led them to where they are. Of course, coming up with this kind of motivation can be tough, especially in a world like D&D, where some problems that are unsolvable in the real world can be taken care of easily with magic. One of the things that makes Ginny's goal so perfect for this is that it isn't really about the mechanic of erasing his memory. It's about shame. He regrets the choices he made, and the painful memory of those choices is what gives Kima power over him. We can all relate to the feeling of shame. It's one of those inescapable human experiences that can't really be solved. I mean, Greater Restoration has a very specific list of effects, and I'm pretty sure radical self-acceptance isn't one of them. This type of existential wound is a goldmine for sympathetic villains. Regret, grief, mortality, injustice, powerlessness. Anakin turns to the dark side because he is afraid of losing the person he loves. We're all afraid of that, and it's a very human and also unavoidable pain to know that there is nothing we can do. We could lose the people we love anytime. And yet, not once has a demon approached me and offered to make my husband immortal for the small price of my soul. I'm I'm ready to negotiate. This sort of psychological pain point doesn't need to be obvious. You don't have to be like, hey guys, we're playing Trauma the Adventure. Your villain's goal can and should involve all the fantasy stuff that suits your game. Interplanar portals and dark magic and as many MacGuffins as you want. But if it comes from a deeper root, then not only will it be relatable, but it'll be a lot harder for your players to resolve with the creative use of a single spell slot. Okay, onward to step 2. There is a point in K-pop Demon Hunters where Jinwoo switches sides. Rumi convinces him that if he teams up with Huntrix, he can be free, and he agrees to do it. But when the time comes to prove it, he betrays her. I think this is an essential beat in a sympathetic villain story. If there comes a point when the good guys are starting to win the villain over, or even just starting to have empathy for them and questioning if they're redeemable, that's when the villain needs to backslide. I know this might sound a little formulaic, but hear me out. If all it takes to flip a villain is a couple of emotional heart-to-hearts and a group hug, then congratulations, you've created the least threatening, least complex villain in history. You've totally undercut your own story. Not only are you basically saying that your villain's conviction was never that strong, but you're also making the player's success less valuable by making it feel too easy. Your villain has chosen to do terrible things, and most people don't make that kind of decision lightly. Your players need to feel like turning the villain to their side isn't an easy path. That way, if they actually succeed at it, that success feels meaningful and earned. Sometimes one betrayal is enough for the party to say, well, we tried, evil it is, and that's valid. Sometimes that is the arc. Other times though, the party will keep trying, convinced that there's still a spark of good in there. Either way, I'm a firm believer that a sympathetic villain should only betray the party once. Any more, and it's less tragic tale of a good man fallen and more toxic ex that they keep texting back for some reason. It's the kind of twist that gets less fun if it's repeated. If players do successfully convert the villain to their side through persistence and faith, the fact that they got past that betrayal and kept trying is going to make them feel extra accomplished when they pull it off. By the way, switching sides doesn't have to mean full-on joining the group chat. Maybe the villain lets the party escape when they could have finished them off. Maybe they hold back the killing blow. Maybe they turn on their own side at a crucial moment, giving the party the slight edge they needed. There's a whole messy spectrum between a full redemption arc and hesitating just long enough to let the heroes win the day. But no matter where you land, it's gonna feel super dramatic and make the party feel like their efforts to view the villain in shades of gray have been rewarded. Now, you might be asking, Ginny, if the villain switches sides, doesn't that just end the arc? First of all, love the enthusiasm. Second of all, I am literally in the middle of a video, so maybe just jot down your questions for the end, okay? One of the scariest things for a dungeon master about running a sympathetic villain is the fear that if you let players successfully appeal to their humanity, or maybe just take advantage of it, your villain will lose all their narrative power as an antagonist. That's where the third step comes in. Behind every sympathetic villain, there needs to be a bigger, unsympathetic villain. This works in a few ways. First, it keeps the tension alive. Even if your party is trying to drag the villain towards redemption, someone else is yanking them back. Sure, your players are doing their best to convince the villain to reform, but somebody else is doing their best to remind your villain of what they have to lose by switching sides. When Jinwoo wavers, it's Kima who twists the knife and reminds him, hey buddy, freedom is not on the menu. Second, it protects the stakes of the story, allowing you to be open to all the ways your sympathetic villain might respond to your party. They're free to question their loyalty without completely erasing the threat and the tension. Your players can throw out all their best arguments, roll nat 20s on persuasion, and you don't have to panic that you'll run out of opposition. You don't have to be scared of your party having a real impact on the villain. The stakes stay intact because there's still somebody standing behind the villain who's evil just because it's a Tuesday. Of course, the other benefit of having a bigger bad is that you're able to carry on the story no matter what happens with your sympathetic villain. Whether they get redeemed or die or just walk off into the sunset to rethink their life choices, you've got another antagonist ready to go. With or without Jinwoo, Kima is an eternal force of evil. Even at the end of the movie, all Huntrix can really do is subdue him. If this were a D&D campaign and it wasn't over yet, Kima would instantly and organically shift into the role of primary villain. At the end of K-pop Demon Hunters, Jinwoo sacrifices himself to save Rumi. I know, men will do literally anything but go to therapy. Of course, you don't have to kill your sympathetic villain, but I will admit it's a little tidier. If they live, you've got to decide what they're doing next. Sticking around as an ally, leaving on a personal quest, finally pursuing their lifelong passion of interpretive dance. That's why I always carry a sword. because you either die a villain or live long enough to become an interpretive dancer. But a sacrifice like Jinu's can be a powerful tool. It rewards your players for investing in the villain's humanity, and it cranks up their hatred for the bigger bad. Not only is Kima still evil incarnate, but now he's the guy who took out their newly redeemed ally. It's the ultimate sympathetic act for your villain, making them into a victim of the new antagonist. So to recap, they need a relatable reason to do evil things, their path to redemption should not be linear, and there should always be a bigger, badder villain pulling the strings. This might sound like it would get repetitive, but once you start spotting it, you'll realize that half your favorite sympathetic villains are running this exact same software. For example, Zuko's goal in Avatar: The Last Airbender is to earn his father's approval by capturing the Avatar. In the Crystal Catacombs of Ba Sing Se, he starts to rethink things, but ultimately betrays Katara and Iroh by siding with Azula. And when he finally does ally with Team Avatar, Fire Lord Ozai sweeps in like, "Hi there, I'll be your final boss today. Can I start you off with some war crimes?" Our stories are full of these patterns, and that's not a bug, it's a feature. We repeat them because we connect to them, so don't be scared to use a formula. It's what you do with your characters and themes and fantasy MacGuffins that make it feel fresh. And while I do love a good sympathetic villain, not every villain needs to come with a tragic backstory and a side of self-actualization. Jinu might be redeemable, but the other Saja Boys, the other demons, and Kima himself, definitely not. Sometimes your players just want to roll initiative and beat the shit out of somebody who deserves it. Moral dilemmas are great, but if every fight turns into a trolley problem, it can start to get exhausting. If you find that your players are talking too much and fighting too little, I have a video all about that right here. I think it's a good complement to this video to help you make sure that you cover the whole spectrum of sympathetic villains to truly evil monsters in your games. It's the most cathartic thing we can hope for in a world where it is not acceptable to use this thing on the guy taking a call on speaker in the doctor's office waiting room.